Cursed House by the Storyteller. There are places in the world, tucked away in forgotten corners, where the air itself seems to carry the weight of unspoken secrets. One such place is the old house that sits at the edge of the village, its walls worn with the passage of time and its windows sealed shut by 1,000 untold stories. They say that those who venture too close to its gates never come back the same, or not at all. The house is a vessel, not of bricks and mortar, but of memories, of souls lost and time distorted. Within its decaying structure lies a force that has lingered for centuries, waiting for those brave enough or foolish enough to uncover the truths buried within. As the wind howls through the trees and the night settles in, we gather around, not to seek refuge, but to listen to the tale of those who dared to uncover the house's darkest secrets, the ghosts of those forgotten by time, and the horrors that linger still. Autumn had arrived when the paranormal research team set foot in a small village hidden deep within the dense forests of Europe. The last light of the day filtered weakly through the trees, painting a bleak and eerie picture. Gentle winds blew along the cobbled paths, carrying with them the damp scent of decaying leaves and wet earth. It was a place where time seemed to have stopped, an isolated village, unknown to most outsiders. Among the many haunted tales told by the villagers, one story stood out: an abandoned house that had remained untouched for centuries. The house stood alone on the edge of the village, surrounded by an ancient, shadowy forest. The villagers, especially the elderly, always warned that no one should enter it after dark. On quiet nights, those passing by would often report strange noises, unexplained footsteps echoing through empty halls, whispers, or even faint giggles in the darkness. That house has been deserted for hundreds of years. No one remembers exactly who built it, but the stories have been passed down from generation to generation, said Helena, an elderly woman who had lived in the village all her life, when the team asked her about the place. There are souls trapped inside, spirits that can't move on. Anyone who dares to enter, if they aren't haunted, they'll never return the same. The team consisted of Thomas, a seasoned investigator in the paranormal field; Sarah, an expert in spirit communication; Mark, a specialist in supernatural phenomena analysis; Lily, a psychologist with deep knowledge of spiritual occurrences and altered states of mind; and Ethan, the videographer and audio technician for the project. Though each had their own reasons for joining the expedition, they all shared a common goal: to uncover the truth behind the strange occurrences and investigate the cursed house. "We're going in at night," Thomas said firmly, his voice filled with resolve. "Only in the dark can we truly experience the mystery and supernatural events." As they approached the old house, an unsettling feeling washed over them. The house loomed ahead, partly hidden among towering ancient trees. Thick branches blocked out the sun, casting a gloomy atmosphere, like a massive coffin buried beneath the earth. The roof had partially collapsed. The walls were rotting, and the shattered windows revealed a desolate interior where no one would dare to linger. Ethan managed to switch on his camera just before they crossed the threshold. The old wooden door groaned with a chilling creak as it opened, as if the house itself was exhaling a cold, ghostly breath. "It seems like no one's been in here for a very long time," Mark said as they stepped into the dark hallway. "Something feels off, like we're being watched." Thomas nodded, moving slowly, his eyes scanning the smallest details. Though abandoned, the house still bore the marks of time: faded paintings, decaying furniture, and tattered rugs thick with dust. The team decided to split up for a more thorough investigation. Sarah and Ethan entered a small room near the window. The dim light from a flashlight revealed an old table, upon which sat a worn, decaying book. "This looks like a journal," Sarah whispered, her voice low and uneasy. "There might be important information in here." As she opened the book, a piece of paper slipped out from between the pages. The writing was faded but still legible. "We cannot escape. They are coming." The diary Sarah found was just one of countless traces of a buried past in this old house. The piece of paper that fell out from between the book's pages was a warning, as if this house wasn't just haunted. It was a trap for spirits that had been imprisoned. Sarah carefully picked up the piece of paper, clearly feeling a chill emanating from it. She read the faded words, partially legible. "We cannot escape. They are coming." That warning seemed to carry a deeper message, but Sarah couldn't decipher it immediately. "What's coming?" Sarah whispered, a sense of unease rising in her chest. She turned to look at the research team, who were still searching through the other rooms of the house. At that moment, only Sarah and Ethan remained in the room. "This place feels strange. Do you think this diary will help us figure out what's really going on?" Ethan asked, still holding the video camera, the dim light from his flashlight illuminating the dark corners of the room. Sarah didn't answer right away. She felt a cold shiver run down her spine when she thought about everything that had happened in this house. The warning in the diary felt like a reminder of some looming danger. Meanwhile, Mark, Lily, and Thomas had gone deeper into the house. Mark and Lily explored the rooms upstairs, while Thomas headed into the basement, an area the villagers often spoke of as the source of strange occurrences. He didn't know that beneath his feet, something was waiting. Thomas carefully descended the worn-out stairs. The further he went, the colder the air became, as if the deeper he went, the more damp and oppressive the darkness grew. He turned on his flashlight and swept the beam around. The basement walls were covered in moss and dust, making the place even more gloomy. Suddenly, the beam stopped at one spot. On the opposite wall was a large painting of a woman with a blurry face, her sunken eyes filled with endless sorrow. Thomas stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the painting. A strange feeling swept over him. It was as if there was life inside the painting, as if the woman within was staring straight at him, urging him to come closer. Something's not right, Thomas thought, pulling his hand back as he sensed an unusual presence. Is she Elizabeth? The reason he thought of the name Elizabeth was because of a story Mrs. Helena had told earlier about a woman who once lived in the house. Elizabeth, according to her, had delved into spiritual rituals to banish evil spirits. But something went wrong, and perhaps the ritual had caused her soul and her families to be trapped forever. While Thomas investigated the painting, Mark and Lily continued exploring the upper floors. They discovered a hidden room behind a large bookshelf where old books were stacked high. One particular book caught their attention. It was wrapped in black cloth and covered in a thick layer of dust. Lily carefully opened it and began flipping through the pages. These pages described ancient rituals practiced by the people of this land. One specific ritual stood out: a rite to worship and imprison spirits, to keep them from escaping and harming the living. Mark read aloud a passage. The spirits are forbidden from leaving the house, to protect both the outside world and the inside. This seems like a way to seal the spirits, to stop them from entering the invisible realm, Mark whispered. But why would they do that? What really happened in this house? Lily felt a strange tension. Maybe we're already too late. This house has been cursed for a long time. Night had fallen, and the research group decided to gather in a large room where they would begin the ritual and conduct deeper research. The atmosphere in the house grew heavier. Strange sounds began to echo through the darkness. The creaking of windows, the distant sound of footsteps in the hallways, and the soft sighing of something unseen. Sarah tried to focus on the diary, but couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She looked up and saw a shadow pass quickly across the window, disappearing like a thin mist. A chill swept through her. "Ethan, did you see that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Ethan turned, but there was nothing there, only darkness. "I feel like someone's watching us," Sarah continued, clutching the diary tightly. "Maybe we're disturbing something." Ethan said nothing, just turned his camera back on to record what was happening. But his camera began to act strangely. The screen flickered between light and darkness, then suddenly displayed blurry images. Each time it happened, a soft whisper echoed through the air as if someone were speaking, saying something they couldn't quite make out. "Sarah, I don't know anymore. This is getting weirder by the minute," Ethan whispered, his eyes fixed on the screen. At that moment, the group realized something crucial. They were not the only ones in this house. The strange feeling kept intensifying as the research team continued exploring the house. The deeper the night grew, the more unexplainable phenomena occurred. The atmosphere grew colder, and unexplained noises echoed constantly, heightening the tension within each person. The group gradually realized that they were no longer merely seekers of truth behind these mysteries. They were becoming part of a haunting story that the house itself had begun to tell. They gathered in a large room where they decided to compile all the information they had collected to come up with the next plan. Every old book, every piece of paper that fell from the diary, the marks on the walls, all pointed to the fact that this house held a history filled with bizarre spiritual rituals, a history that the former residents could not control. "We need to understand more about the worship ritual that Mark discovered," Sarah said, her voice low and her face clouded with worry. "It seems like we've gone too deep into this house without realizing what we're doing. Maybe these spirits don't want us to be here." Mark nodded, his eyes fixed on the old books he had found in the hidden room. "This ritual, it's not just a regular form of worship. It's a method of sealing spirits. Maybe one of those spirits wasn't sealed properly." Ethan continued filming with his camera, but not long after, his screen began to flicker again. This time, it wasn't just faint light. Strange images started to appear. A blurry face, unclear and fading in, began to emerge on the screen. A face staring straight at him, with eyes void of emotion, as if it were no longer human. "Do you see that?" Ethan stammered, his voice tinged with fear. "I don't know what's happening with my camera anymore." Sarah stepped closer to Ethan, looking at the camera screen. The blurry face had now turned into a giant dark shadow, slowly engulfing the space. Suddenly, a whisper came from behind them. A familiar voice, like a whisper from someone long gone. "You shouldn't be here. You don't belong here." The group turned around, but saw nothing but darkness. The atmosphere around them grew heavier, as though the house was beginning to consume them. "We need to get out of here," Thomas said, his voice echoing through the gloom of the room. Everyone agreed, but as they stood up, a door in the room slammed shut, blocking their way out. The group jumped, startled and confused. "No way, that door couldn't have shut on its own," Lily said, eyes wide as she stared at the now locked door. But that wasn't the only strange thing. Suddenly, a thick mist began to fill the room from an unknown source. It was so dense that they could no longer see anything beyond it. Another sound echoed, heavy footsteps, like a ghost moving through the room with an unstoppable force. Everything around them started to blur, and something strange was approaching. "We're trapped in here," Mark shouted, panic in his voice. "Something's coming for us." Faint, ghostly figures emerged from the mist, their forms vague and indistinct. Whispered voices, unclear warnings echoed all around them. One of the spirits began to approach Sarah, its hollow eyes staring at her as if trying to say something. She trembled, clutching the diary tightly, and in that moment, she realized that part of these spirits had been imprisoned long ago, trapped in a ritual they could never escape. These ghosts were the souls of those who had once lived in the house, souls forever trapped in this space. And one of them, the woman from the painting Thomas had seen, was Elizabeth, the one who created the sealing ritual, but failed to secure her own soul and that of her family. As Sarah recognized the connection between the spirits and the sealing ritual, she urgently called the others over. "This is why they can't escape. The ritual wasn't completed. These souls are trapped because of a mistake in the past." Thomas, with his understanding of spiritual phenomena, saw that this house wasn't just haunted. It was a place that sealed dark forces, spirits that hadn't been fully purified. That made the house a weak point in the fabric of reality, a place where spirits could move between the physical world and the invisible one. At that moment, they realized there was only one way to free these souls and escape the house. They had to complete the interrupted ritual by reconstructing the steps that had been left unfinished. The research team now stood in the middle of the haunted house, realizing they could not leave until the ancient ritual was completed. The spirits, long sealed away, could not escape, and this house was the sacred ground that held secrets they had to uncover. Sarah felt more tense than ever, as the ghosts still hovered around them, and the whispers continued, echoing like a warning. "We have to find that ritual," Sarah said, trying to stay calm. "If we don't, we'll never get out of here." Mark nodded, his eyes fixed on the ancient book he had found earlier. "The ritual requires a sacrifice. It could be a person, but I don't know if we can go through with that. And if it's not done properly, we might not survive." "We don't have a choice," Lily replied, her voice hoarse. "This house has held these souls for years, and now it has awakened. We have to set them free." Sarah looked toward the window, where faint light flickered from the lanterns outside. But the longer she stared, the more she felt a strange presence, as if someone were watching them from the shadows. Suddenly, a door at the end of the hallway creaked open on its own, despite there being no wind or physical cause. The group exchanged glances, eyes filled with confusion, but they knew this might be their only chance for salvation. Somehow the house seemed to be leading them towards something important. "Let's go," Sarah said firmly. "This might be the next step of the ritual." Each step echoed through the dark hallway, making the space feel heavier. The door led them into a large room, where at the center stood a grand altar with a strange circle drawn on the floor. Around the altar were ancient items, candles, animal bones, and a large dish made of black stone. The ancient symbols etched into the stone dish made the group dizzy. They were symbols Mark had seen in the old book. They didn't belong to any language they knew, but they felt eerily familiar in this grim atmosphere. "This altar, it's not just part of the ritual," Mark said, eyes falling to the carved marks on the floor. "It's like a trap, but a trap for whom?" Before they could continue, a loud bang echoed behind them, like a door slamming shut. They turned quickly, but saw nothing except the thick darkness. Sarah felt a strange coldness rise inside her, as if an invisible force was beginning to take control. "What do we do now?" Lily asked, her voice trembling in panic. Sarah stepped closer to the altar, staring down at the ancient characters engraved on the ground. "This ritual isn't simple. Maybe we have to offer a soul, or maybe another soul to replace the ones trapped." Mark hesitated. "Another soul? You mean sacrificing one of us?" Sarah didn't answer right away. She stared at the symbols as if they were urging her, calling her to do something. These spirits had been sealed away too long, and the things this house demanded were beyond their imagination. There seemed to be no other way but to finish the ritual, even if it meant paying a painful price. "No, we can't sacrifice one of us," Lily said, her voice shaking. "That's not what we're meant to do." "We have no choice," Sarah replied, gritting her teeth at the thought of what they might have to do. "It's the only way to free these souls, and the only way for us to survive." As the group hesitated, searching for a solution, the light on the altar began to flicker. The whispers grew louder, as if the spirits of the house were trying to communicate with them. A faint ghost appeared before the altar, the figure of a woman in old-fashioned clothing. She looked at Sarah with sorrowful eyes, as if begging for help. "You must finish it. You must complete the ritual to free us," the ghost said, her voice like wind blowing through a crack in the door. "We've been trapped for too long. Only when the ritual is complete can we be freed." The words hit them like a shock. They realized the spirits were not malevolent beings, but innocent people, trapped in the house for countless years. But if they didn't complete the ritual, the souls would never be released. Sarah took a deep breath, staring at the altar and the ancient markings on the floor. "We have to do it right. There's no turning back." The group fell silent. There was no choice left but to perform the ritual. Sarah stepped forward, placed her hand on the altar, and began to chant the words from the ancient book. The symbols on the floor started to glow. Light engulfed them, and the darkness of the house slowly began to dissolve. The spirit of Elizabeth, the woman from the painting, appeared once more, but this time her eyes no longer held sorrow. She looked at the group, then smiled, as if to thank them for setting her free. The house shook, and the ghosts around them slowly faded, no longer haunting or threatening. At last, with the ritual complete, a strange peace spread through the house. The spirits had been freed, and the house was no longer a place of haunting and mystery. The house had fallen silent once again, but none of the group could feel the truth that everything had truly ended. After the ritual, when the spirits had been freed and the house no longer held the oppressive darkness, the team felt as though they had just survived a life-and-death battle. But an uneasy feeling still lingered in their hearts. Sarah, Mark, Ethan, Lily, and Thomas stood in the altar room where the ritual had been completed. The symbols on the floor still glowed, but the light no longer felt cold. Instead, it was a gentle glow, as if the house had been healed. "We did it," Sarah sighed, but her voice still held uncertainty. "We've freed them, but I don't feel at peace." Mark looked around, his eyes distant. "Maybe we haven't fully escaped this house. Everything still feels too strange." As they prepared to leave the room, a large door suddenly appeared in their line of sight. Unlike any doors they had seen before, this one seemed covered in a misty fog, its interior impossible to discern. "Can we not leave?" Lily asked, her hand trembling as she pointed to the door. "No, this door is different from the ones we've seen," Ethan replied, his voice strange. "Maybe it opens to something we can't understand." Sarah, feeling a strange pull, walked towards the door. "We've freed the spirits, but maybe there's still a secret in this house that we haven't uncovered." Lily looked at Sarah with concern. "Where are you going? It could be a trap." But Sarah didn't answer. She simply walked towards the door and opened it. A different space appeared beyond it, unlike any room they had encountered in the house before. It was a pitch-black room with a large table in the center, upon which lay an open book. The pages turned on their own in a strange rhythm, as if an invisible force was controlling them. The group stood frozen, no one daring to approach the table. The book seemed like an invitation, but also a threat. Sarah felt a strange sensation in her chest, as if she were being drawn into an inescapable vortex. What is that?" Thomas asked, staring intently at the book. Sarah couldn't resist the curiosity. She stepped closer to the table and reached out to touch the book. As soon as her fingers brushed the pages, a flash of blue light erupted, engulfing her. The group jumped back, but this light wasn't malevolent. It carried a strange sensation, as if a spiritual doorway had opened. A voice echoed in the space, its origin impossible to pinpoint. "You have broken the seal of the past. You have freed the spirits, but you did not know that this house holds a greater secret. Something that will never die." The blue light from the book quickly spread throughout the room, and the group felt as if they were being pulled into a spiritual storm. Vague images began to form in their minds, strange scenes, ghostly figures, and shapeless beings that seemed out of place in this world. It was as though they were stepping into a different realm, where time no longer mattered. Sarah felt a cold hand touch her shoulder. She turned, but saw nothing but the pitch-black darkness. Who's there?" A cold, mocking laugh echoed in the space, a sound full of doom and terror, as if a spirit from another world was waiting to break free. "This house holds eternal hauntings," the voice said, full of defiance. "You cannot leave. You will pay the price for your actions." The darkness enveloped them, and then, suddenly, all light vanished. Only the vast, terrifying darkness remained, and an eerie silence took over. Sarah looked at the book, and a cold chill seized her mind. It was then that she realized a horrifying truth. The house was not just a place to imprison spirits, but also a place where something even more monstrous had been sealed away, far worse than the freed souls. The house was a gateway to another world, a world of unpurged spirits, dark forces that had been trapped long ago. And only when the ritual was completed would something rise, something that had never truly died, a ghost or a mysterious creature beyond imagination. Sarah turned to look at her team, but now they could no longer turn back. The blue light had immersed them in another world, a world full of darkness and mythical creatures. A door had opened, and the research team was no longer mere observers. They had become part of the strange, part of the secrets they could not yet understand. The book remained open, its pages continuing to turn, drawing a path that no one in the group could reverse. They had freed the spirits, but they didn't realize they had awakened something far more dangerous. The atmosphere around them grew heavier by the second. Whispering voices, sounds that could not be traced, echoed around them as though an invisible force was watching their every move. The light from the book grew brighter, like a lantern in the dark, but this light did not bring peace. It only made them feel pulled into a world they could not comprehend. "We need to get out of here," Sarah said, her voice tense. "Hurry, there's no time." But even as they tried to move toward the door, ghosts suddenly appeared from the shadows, blocking their way. These spirits were no longer weak and fragile. They were filled with anger and resentment. "You cannot escape," a voice from one of the spirits rang out. But this time it wasn't a whisper. It was a curse, full of power and pain. Ethan charged forward, attempting to push one of the spirits aside, but its cold hand gripped him. He struggled, feeling as if his body was freezing, unable to move. "Ethan!" Lily screamed, but she too was surrounded by other spirits, figures emerging from the walls and floor as though the house itself was trying to swallow them whole. Mark and Thomas rushed to help Ethan, but every time they touched a spirit, they felt an odd pain, as if the energy of the soul was draining their life force. Sarah turned back to look at the book, feeling an odd compulsion. This book wasn't just a doorway to the trapped souls. It was the only key they had to escape the house. But what should they do with the book? Would it help them, or only make things worse? "Sarah, don't touch it," Mark shouted from behind, but his voice was drowned out by the screams of the spirits. "This is not the way to solve this." But Sarah couldn't stop herself. She felt an odd power from the book, a force that seemed to draw her closer. She reached out and placed her hand on the turning pages. A brilliant light burst forth, so bright it made her eyes ache. The moment Sarah touched the book, a door appeared before the group. It wasn't an exit. It was a strange door, surrounded by eerie glowing streaks. The spirits began to scream as if they knew that this door was the path to doom, not only for the research team, but for all the souls that had been trapped for so long. "Go through the door," Sarah shouted. "If not, we won't have a way out." Despite their confusion, the group had no other choice. They ran toward the door, but the spirits continued to pursue them, reaching out with cold hands as if to drag them back. As they passed through the door, the space around them suddenly changed. They were no longer in the house. Instead, they stood in an eerie, dark space, a cold and desolate land, as if they had fallen into another dimension. "Where are we?" Lily asked, her voice trembling with fear. Sarah didn't answer immediately, her eyes fixed on the surroundings. A strange sensation rose in her chest, as if they had stepped into another world, one that didn't belong to humans. The space around them seemed to be made from pure darkness. The ground beneath their feet was broken stones, shiny black rocks devoid of any life. The sun didn't shine here, and the sky was overcast with a thick layer of clouds. The group stood still, sensing the presence of an invisible force watching them. "We can't just stand here," Mark said, trying to calm himself. "We have to find a way out of here before things get worse." Sarah nodded, although she too didn't know what to do next. She looked around, only seeing darkness and strange, fleeting images in the night. Unformed creatures appeared and vanished, leaving behind a sense of indescribable fear. "What do we do?" Ethan asked, his voice almost choking. "Can we go back?" Ethan's question made Sarah feel suffocated. No, they couldn't go back. They had opened a door, but not one that led back to their old world. A cold truth gradually revealed itself. They were trapped between two worlds. They couldn't go back, they couldn't move forward. "This house is not a place to imprison souls," Sarah said, her voice growing softer, as if she were uncovering something greater. "It's a part of another world, a dark world, where there is no escape." A loud noise echoed from far away, a sound like massive doors opening, and the darkness slowly began to spread toward the research team. They couldn't run, couldn't hide, couldn't do anything to change their fate. "We've awakened something, and now it's awake," Sarah whispered, "and all we can do is face it." The faint light from the world they had just entered gradually faded, and the atmosphere around them became more oppressive than ever. The group stood still, no one daring to speak, as if they were waiting for something terrible to happen. Every breath they took could be sensed by the invisible creatures lurking in the shadows. Sarah looked at the ground beneath her feet, where black cracks formed strange patterns. Everything around them seemed to be ready to devour them. The shadowy creatures had never stopped watching them, the unseen eyes always haunting, and the sense of impending death grew clearer and clearer. "We can't just stand here," Mark said, his voice gasping as his eyes scanned around, as if searching for an escape. "We have to do something. We can't keep running away." Sarah nodded and walked toward a nearby rock face, where strange symbols stood out. She felt a mysterious power coming from these symbols, as if they were calling her, as if this was the sign of a way out. "Maybe this is the only way," Sarah said, her eyes focused on the symbols on the rock, then looking back at her team. "These symbols, they're part of something bigger, something we don't understand." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes full of doubt. "Is this the only way? Can we trust this?" Sarah looked back at her friends, their faces tense and worried. But there was no other choice. This was the only way to escape. "We have nothing to lose," Sarah replied, her voice growing firm. "If this is the only way out of here, we have to try." They approached the rock face, and as soon as Sarah touched the symbols, an arched door opened, revealing a dark tunnel. The shadowy creatures still surrounded them, but they couldn't get close as they stepped into the tunnel. The cold and heaviness of that space seemed to give way to a strange sensation, as if another door had opened. They stepped through the door, entering the tunnel. The space inside seemed to grow increasingly tight, and only the sound of their footsteps echoed in the silence. With each step, each movement, they felt like they were plunging deeper into a world from which there would be no return. Just when they thought they had found a way out, a terrible laugh echoed from behind them, and darkness enveloped them. A large creature, hazy like a monstrous shape, appeared from the shadows, so tall that it almost filled the entire tunnel. Its eyes glowed bright red, as if challenging them. "You can't escape." Its voice rumbled through the space. "This house has swallowed the souls of many, and now it's your turn." Sarah didn't step back. She realized that this was the evil they had inadvertently unleashed. A creature of darkness, sealed for centuries in that house, had now been freed because of them, and once again, its existence threatened to consume everything. "We can't let it win," Sarah said, resolute. "If we don't fight now, it will not only destroy us, but everything in this world." With incredible strength, Sarah moved toward the shadowy creature, her eyes full of determination. She began to read the inscriptions on the rock face in a language she didn't even understand. The symbols seemed like a kind of incantation, and as soon as Sarah finished the final words, beams of light shot from her hands, surrounding the shadowy creature. The light was as powerful as a storm, illuminating everything in the tunnel, and the shadowy creature screamed in agony. But the more it screamed, the more it was enveloped by the light, like a flame burning everything around it. Then, in a moment, the dark creature shattered into millions of glowing pieces, scattering throughout the space, leaving behind an air of freshness, no longer haunting, no longer grim. When the shadowy creature was finally destroyed, the tunnel ahead of them began to brighten, and a soft light appeared, leading them back to their world. The ghosts that had once haunted them were no longer present, and the air around the group became peaceful. The research team stood still, unable to believe what had just happened. They had fought dark forces, faced invisible evil, and ultimately, They had won. The house, once filled with so much hatred, was now empty of spirits, and peace had returned. "We did it," Ethan said, his voice soft, no longer filled with fear. "Finally, we've escaped." Sarah looked toward her team, then at the bright door ahead. She knew that not all the strange events had ended, but at least they had won this battle. The research team stepped through the door into the daylight, where they regained a sense of peace. Though they could never forget what had happened, they had realized something important. Exploration and uncovering mysteries were part of the journey. And no matter what, they had survived to tell the story of a house, the souls it had imprisoned, and a dark force that had been defeated. Thank you for joining me through this story, exploring the darkness, the forgotten souls, and the secrets that have been sealed away. The story of the cursed house is not just an adventure into the mysterious world, but also a reminder of the things yet to be explained and the power of the past. I hope that through this tale, you have found drama, suspense, and sometimes a little fear, but also a belief that even in the darkness, we can still find the light. Thank you for choosing to read, and I hope you will continue following the footsteps of the storyteller in the next journeys. See you again in new stories, where mysteries and dangers are always waiting.